Well, welcome everybody to World News Day 2025. It is now the 8th anniversary of this event, and we're coinciding this year's event with the launch of BackgroundBriefing.news. I'm Mark Laudi, and in the next 20 minutes, we're going to be walking through the reasons behind background briefing, what it is, and of course, can journalism survive? That's the big question. And AI obviously features very much in that survival story. And with that in mind, we're going to be talking about how we launched BackgroundBriefing.news and why. For starters, during COVID, we came up with a plan to list all of our media training clients. Meantime, we have about 3,000 participants who've come through the studio for media training. And we figured, why not actually make them available to the media? So rather than just train them and then nobody ever calls, we now have a list of almost 3,000 experts who are available to be searched by the media. Now, for those of you in corporate communications, don't worry. The journalists actually reach you when they inquire for an interview. But then we thought, what about the next step? The next step is, once we have these guests in our studio and they've recorded some excellent pieces as part of their media training, why don't we make that content available? And we called it background briefing because the idea is, as we know in corporate communications, we shouldn't be giving background briefings to journalists. So this is a bit of a play on that word. Background briefing aims to educate journalists on complex topics before they conduct an interview with you. How many times have you seen this in corporate communications where you've called a press conference and then you get some rather pedestrian questions? Or you've arranged an interview and not everybody is as well informed as Amit is, and is actually not as well researched and has done their homework as well as some of the veterans. Don't you wish that they had the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the topic before they came for the interview? And that is, in essence, the genesis of background briefing. Now, there are a few other bits and pieces that we need to take into consideration. Firstly, that background briefing doesn't exist just as a news site. Our aim is actually not reach, it's impact. And for that is, in essence, what we're going to be talking about today. You can see that it's positioned very much as a news site, but the secret sauce is that it's actually targeting to be read by machines. And for that reason, when you go through various stories, take your pick, what you'll see is not just the headline and the guest and a story, you're also seeing information about the speaker. The AI usually picks up on the authority of the person being quoted. So we have to provide this information so that when the AI crawlers sweep across our site, they recognize that these are all very senior and experienced people. Similarly with the FAQ, that's not usually something you read in a news article. But it's essential because the crawler wants to, in essence, take these questions and match them and the answers with user queries. We see that in some of these other stories as well, where we've added, for example, summary overviews, all in an effort to please the crawlers. And it is against that backdrop that we are holding our official launch today. We are very much an owned media platform rather than an earned one, but the aim is to influence the AI overview, which has become so much part of our daily lives. Quick question. How many of you actually click on the links that are presented when you've undertaken a search and you're reading the AI overview? You click on the links?
Sometimes they don't work.
Sometimes they don't work. Yes, sometimes they're dead links. But how many of you actually are quite happy with what's provided in the AI overview and you don't click any of the links? Yes?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes. Depends on the question. Broadly speaking, the trend is on to not click. And the research that you'll read about, for example, here in The Economist, just goes to show how much of an impact that's had on traffic. Have a look. Isn't that crazy? And if you're in corporate communications and you think we're going to take part in this media interview and then we'll have all this great coverage and it'll be very positive coverage, people aren't reading it. They're reading the overview. If The Economist is writing about it, you can be fairly well assured that this is a trend to be watched. Kicking off this discussion was Campaign back in May. Take a look at this. "15 to 30% reductions in click-through rates? What does that tell you about trying to get on page 1 of Google News?" And one last story, this one is from the BBC. Once again, if the BBC is reporting about it, you can imagine what sort of mass impact this must have. Have a look. So that's why we are here today, to see, is AI going to work for us or against us if we're in journalism? And in corporate communications, are we now going to sync with the declining click-through rates, or are we actually going to be able to use AI in a comprehensive and constructive way? This quote in this article from OpenAI's blog. So Walter Fernandez, Channel News Asia, very much behind using AI and making sure that despite AI, journalism continues to survive. So let's have this conversation now on stage with our two special guests. So please join me now in welcoming our two special guests here on stage. Our first guest is the Chair of Digital Disruption at ESSEC Business School. He is Professor Jan Ondres. And he's joined by another one of our special guests from the AI world, CIO of a very large international shipping company and former CTO of Workday, Mr. Damien Leach. Cool. And once again, the opportunity is there for you to also ask your questions. Please just raise your hand and we will ignore you. No, please just raise your hand and we will make sure that you have your voice heard as well. So, based on what you've read about AI, Prof. Jan, how serious a trouble is journalism in? And by extension, those of us in corporate communications, how hard a time are we going to have getting the message out?
So, when I saw the title of the session today about survival, it sounds very negative, right? But then I went back in time and I thought, well, it's not the first time that the news industry is in trouble, right? We had the first disruption, digital disruption, was when websites started to appear, right? All the ads revenues were going into the web and not anymore on paper. So that was the first time. And so the industry had to adapt. Second time, we had the social media taking over a number of newspapers and more traditional media. And so when we look at it, the media industry has always been able to adapt to these disruptions. Now we have AI coming. So the question is AI different from the previous disruptions, and in what sense? So what we look at AI, and I think it goes with what you were saying before, is that there's two things about AI. Automation, so you can automate a number of tasks and small jobs. And you have also augmentation, which is maybe where media should look at it, right? So adaptation of AI, let's say disruption, is looking at not only what could be automated, but also what can be helpful for the journalist. And I think the newsroom, and that's where we see a lot of progress, is the analysis of data, how journalists can actually take advantage of AI to improve what they do on a daily basis, to focus on the value add, right? And so somehow replacing completely journalism, when I saw the title, I was thinking about how, I would say, deep this impact could be. And I just thought, well, we still have a reality to cover. And so far, AI is not able to grasp this reality, what's happening in the world. So potentially the same thing for professors who are doing research like me. It's also a big issue because we could potentially have a research idea and ask AI to just generate the research paper for us. Same for journalists. I have an idea in mind, just write me the article. But at the end of the day, if your article is grounded in the reality, you need to still interview people. And AI cannot do that. You still need to observe what's happening in the reality. And AI cannot do that yet, right? So when we look at it, the journalists could automate a number of the tasks that are not very value add. And then later on, probably focus more on what is really important for journalists and focus more on that. And so to me, the survival, yes, there will be some changes, there will be an adaptation, but I think the survival is guaranteed, I think.
Survival guaranteed, but in a different form, presumably. And Damien, obviously, you're coming at AI from a very much an industrial perspective. Previously in banking, where we also see a massive disruption of AI. Are there any lessons or any parallels that we can learn from the disruption there?
So I think if you look at the output and business value, because I think that's what drives the adoption of AI in industry, it's really about the type of data and the task you're giving AI to solve. And bad quality information or bad quality data generates bad results. So, there's a lot that organizations are doing to try and sanitize the hallucinations that often occur. And there's also a lot of effort being put into qualify a very confident wrong answer that can be generated with AI as well. So we've all probably had those instances where you ask a question, there's a very confident answer, but actually in the back of your mind, you're actually questioning it and you're going, well, is this actually the truth or not? So, for us, it's about driving business value. So when you look at the technology aspects of AI, what is AI good at? Well, it's great at summarizing vast amounts of information very fast. It's great at crunching numbers and looking at anomalies. It's great at doing computer vision detection models, understanding patterns, understanding models. So then when you look at some of the problems that are trying to be solved by industry, such as banks, they're looking at anomaly detection for fraud. In the shipping industry, we're looking at patterns of, transit patterns, logistical challenges. We're looking at weather patterns to understand what impact that has on, the global trade. We're also looking at things like repair and damage estimates and damage notification analysis to try and automate some of those decisions to make more productive outcomes for the organization. All of those things that machines are great at can be enhanced with AI. There's absolutely no question. But will they, be good enough to remove the human in the loop from those decisions? Not yet. And I think it's similar to the medical industry where AI models are becoming incredibly accurate at predicting different diseases from scanned images and so forth. And they're able just to simply look at more data to come up with patterns better. Now, that actually doesn't take away the responsibility of the doctor in making the diagnosis. And I think that's a really important factor that we still need to bring into the picture. So whilst I think, AI is a very, very powerful tool for understanding vast amounts of information, understanding patterns, digesting data, you need to make sure that the data is accurate. You need to make sure that it's current. You need to make sure that there's no errors in the information that you're looking at. And you also have to inject a human in the loop to make sure that those summarizations or the patterns that are being generated by AI are actually truthful or not. And I think it's true for media as well. I think ultimately when you click on publish, you want to make sure that the publications are accurate. And I've actually seen some evidence where, you can tell that the content is being generated by a chatbot, because some of the words in there are, I think it is close to this answer, and then it's the answer, So, and that's obviously computer generated. So there's a lazy approach to adapting to the technology, and there's, I guess, a correct way of adapting and adopting the technology as well for the right reasons.
Still, as we saw from the various click-through rates in those news articles, it looks like people are not clicking through to the content that's generated by the human in the loop. But ultimately, that is what's been paying the bills. So is there, at some point, there's going to be a crunch, right? When we can't afford the human in the loop because there isn't that click-through revenue.
Yeah, I think also, channels of communication have changed over the years, right? When you look at, the different generations of consumption means, TikTok wasn't available, a few years ago. Instagram, obviously in my days, it was sort of Facebook was probably the predominant social media platform. But now, you talk to millennials or Gen Z or even Gen X about Facebook, they're like, what's Facebook? What do you mean? So, for them, they have a different mode of data ingestion to us. So perhaps, the click-through capability of websites isn't there, but then the media options that people have are far more vast than they ever were. So perhaps they're going to TikTok for their news summaries.
And presumably that's where we need to go as journalists. Is that your view, Prof. Jan?
Well, we've seen with social media that the web has given a voice to pretty much anyone, right? It democratized kind of the content production, but also media or the news. We see a lot of influencers or even former journalists having their own channels followed by millions of people. And so when we look at this, there's a real legitimate question, where are people going to get their information from? And so you have to be probably agile enough to adapt to the channels where people go to. And so maybe today, we talked about the number of social media, so people were jumping from one. Generations are in different ones, but and behaviors are changing. We don't know. Now we're using phones. Maybe in the future, we're not going to use phones with screens, but something else without a screen. So then how do we get our information? Are we getting it just with a speaker in or headphone in our ear, maybe later in our brain? Who knows? The question is also the business models behind. Because if I bring it back to the business model, right? I think none of us in this room really enjoy reading advertising or seeing banners and those things, right? It clutters the screen. It prevents us to see sometimes information or very important information because cognitively there's too much going on the screen.
Yes,
right?
Unless it's halftime at the Super Bowl.
Yes. So when we look at these AI overviews, they hit the right spot because they kind of remove all this clutter, give a very short summary of what people want to know, eventually the right information that people are searching for. And so why would I go further, click on a link and be bombarded with other things that I don't care about or that I'm not searching for? So I think we lived in a period of transition now when it comes to advertising. There will be major changes happening also in the e-commerce side, right? Because now people are already starting to look for products using LLMs like chatbots, right? The ChatGPTs and Gemini and so on, to say, find me the 10 best bikes for riding in the mountains. It will give you a list of bikes, and potentially later on, you'll be just able to ask to buy the bike directly for you. And it wouldn't care so much about where the bike comes from, but just based on your preferences, it's going to try to find the best supplier for this bike, yes. Right? So advertising then becomes completely obsolete in that sense, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to have to be influenced by the ad myself. My AI bot or agent, what we call agent e-commerce, right? Nowadays, will automate this process. And so the question is, where should be the focus given? Is it still ads that we know that we have been living? So before we used to have it on print, TV, broadcasting, then web, maybe these ads will disappear. Then it's going to be all about gaining the algorithms by placing yourself in the ranking of maybe the agent or
yes.
how to, so the brands will have to modify that.
Correct. So, for the machines to read.
Exactly. So now the business model for media is a bit more complicated because a lot of the media are living out of the audience they get and the ads that they can monetize, right? The space. So that's where the difficulty comes, how to monetize media, right? The journalist of tomorrow. So some of the influencers, we could learn maybe from the influencers we see on social media.
Indeed. And hopefully we can learn from you too. If you have any questions, comments, or any other input, please feel free to nudge us, and happy to take your input as well. So Jan, Damien, is there anything we can learn from the non-journalism world about how to craft those business models around AI?
Yeah, so great question. I think, for us, the way that we're looking at it from an architectural standpoint is you have a certain amount of knowledge that a trained model will have. And then we're creating what we call genies or agents around that model. So you might have an HR model. You might have an IT model that might be familiar with ITSM practices and so forth. You might have a finance model, might be looking great at crunching numbers. And as a result of that, what we're doing is actually injecting those genies into the flow of work. And, for things like automation purposes. So where we've got a lot of manual practices and manual processes in our organization, we're looking at ways to automate that. I'll give you a really good example. So we've got around 200,000 contracts within our contract database, 10,000 of which are current. Now, for somebody who is working on a strategic tender for a customer, they would like to understand what was the latest contract that they had and any customers that were similar to that client and what the prices, were that were being discussed. Now, for them to trawl through 10,000 contracts and understand exactly what the makeup of those contracts are, to have competitive knowledge, is very hard, right? So often it lent itself to somebody who was highly skilled and had operational knowledge of that customer. So they would pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm talking to this person, what do you think? And it would be a personal person-to-person conversation to try and get some strategic insight. Now it's a conversation with an agent or an automated AI agent. And we can summarize that information very accurately and very clearly and provide a confidence score on the data that we're providing to that person, as well as information such as the price of those contracts. And all of that is incredibly easy for a machine to do because it's just data. Providing your data is good and of good quality. That's the type of thing that is easily solved. So what does that do? It speeds up the sale process, right? It doesn't get rid of the person that's selling, but it makes their role easier because it's been augmented with technology. And I think if you look at the trends of the past, you mentioned it earlier, virtualization, data centers, cloud, these are all hype cycles that have happened with technology. We're in the hype cycle now with AI. We're looking at adopting AI for our organization and practice. There's I would say a little bit of resistance for some of the staff that we have in terms of adopting and adapting to the technology. But actually, we've also got another side of the organization, which is who are able to be digital champions for us, and they're championing the adoption of the technology with us. And from my side as a global CIO and as a technologist, it's really important for us to build that digital native adoption across the organization. Yes. So it's growth culture, it's having a growth mindset, It's encouraging the adoption and experimentation of the technology, finding out what works. It's an experiment.
I know you've been through my media training workshop, but I won't let you get away with not answering this question. How are we going to build a business model around AI in journalism?
So I think it's a challenging question because you really have to understand what problem you're trying to solve. And is there a problem?
I guess who's going to pay the money, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I would suggest that it would be perfect grounds to augment the technology into your flow of work. So from a research standpoint, injecting that into the conversation. Now, will you fully be able to automate and have an AI avatar read the news? Possibly. When you look at some of the most popular Korean bands, they're fully AI generated, and they've got 16 million followers.
Really?
So people are following some of the very popular, and it's fully AI generated.
You don't mean the soda pop?
No, it's an actual band that exists. So
really? Have you heard of this band?
Yes.
What is it called?
Spotify. I wasn't sure about Korean.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Very popular. Yeah.
Right.
So will we see an avatar of Mark? I don't know.
I think people usually have enough of one as it is. But wouldn't that be great? Coming back to our journalism experience, to just be able to drop in all these documents and be able to have the data tell the story. I mean, how many hours did we crunch as journalists trying to figure out, sift through the data? And obviously that's already possible, right? You can use that with Notebook LM, but
yes.
For example, or ChatGPT. But once again, does it solve the question of how we're going to get paid? How do you get paid at the moment? Content producer? Subscriptions?
How do I get paid?
Yeah, or JQ as a digital content producer.
It's how do I get paid? I mean, I do a lot of freelance work, so I do the writing, which I do in a very conventional way. A lot of the clients I work for, I do work for some brand studios as well. The guidelines are very strict. Clients are paying us top money for real humans to do this job. So we don't want you using a generative AI for anything, research or writing.
Even for research?
Yes. But of course, you can, I suppose you can still do that a bit. I do like to use it for research to get out of the block faster. But coming back to the point of links, etc., I would then work. Okay, firstly, to be able to effectively use AI for research, you have to really be able to be able to prompt well. Because if you ask a not very good question and don't tell the AI what it's supposed to act as, then you won't get a very good answer. So it's like if the input determines the output. But even then, I think to then go into the links, well, what if you say, okay, give me ABC based on verified sources. And I would like to go in and look at the links. And very often what I find is the links are repetitive. Right? It's the same link over and over again. Whereas in the top line summary, whether it's Perplexity or ChatGPT, it's saying that it's cited 7 verified sources of information. So there's a lot of, I wouldn't fully rely on AI for research for whether I'm doing some writer for a content studio or for a corporate client or editing a news feature for a magazine or newsletter. But I think it helps me get out of the box a lot faster.
Yes, indeed. Ginny?
I think we're back to another version of the question: who pays for news?
Yes.
And this is it's the same question with the AI layer on top of it. I'm waiting to see if news organizations come together to form their own secure AI data set. And then it's trained on verified news content. After all, news organizations spend millions of dollars training, development, talent. Journalists are trained. We are professionals. We verify our news. We corroborate. We create trusted content. That is our unique selling proposition. That sort of that USP has not been communicated well enough in the day and age of so-called fake news, misinformation, disinformation, campaigns that basically counteract news organizations and undermine what news organizations do. The time perhaps has come where news organizations should come together, create their own product, AI product, which is trained on such content. It is safe to use. You don't risk hallucinations. You can trust this content. It is updated daily, by the hour. You can literally, there's so much content coming out from news organizations anyway, and then make the business case for it. Mm-hmm. I feel that that's something that no one has addressed yet.
Okay, good. Anybody else want to take the microphone?
Maybe just a follow-up from you. I think because the people I work with now are mostly under 25, so they are going to be really the decision makers of tomorrow, if not today. See, there's a big difference between being well-informed and being knowledgeable, right? Just because you're well-informed doesn't mean that you're better, right? So I think my challenge is to ensure that information is then transferred into knowledge that's credible. Like, you cannot write a story without interviewing someone or observing, which is your very first point. You can get all the data in the world, but it's still not a story, because that's the story that's going to survive in the next lap. You can get all the content that you want, but that doesn't make you a storyteller still. So this is my training, to train the next generation of storytellers, and to say that, yep, it's easier, but it's actually harder, even harder now. So actually my question is, do you have tips to to make one a better storyteller with all the tools that you have now?
I think there's a really interesting something that came to mind as you were speaking, and there's a startup, an AI startup in Singapore called AI Verify, and they are focused on certifying and watermarking certificates for various things, be it university or security standards, as an example. There could be an opportunity, I think, for real, newsrooms and media companies to actually start watermarking content, and with that watermarking of that content, potentially you would trust that watermark. So perhaps there's an opportunity there for the media to start paying more for trusted content. And how do you create trusted content? You create real content that's not infused with AI, but is actually real people, conversing. And then once you've established trust, then perhaps people are prepared to pay a little bit more for that.
Prepared to pay for it. You see, Prof. Yan, what you've done kicking off this conversation around disruption and disrupting business models. Any response or reactions to what you've heard?
So I've listened to all the different ideas here in this room, and I feel that at the end of the day, when we say who's going to pay, it's who's going to get the most value out of it. Because at the end of any business model or revenue model, because we can talk about the costs, and I think the discussion we had about automating and making the profession enhanced and so on, that's about the cost and how to optimize it, make it better. When it comes to who do you sell the news to, right? Do you sell it to the AI companies so they can use it and provide it to their subscribers, premium subscribers?
Try telling Google that.
That's one way, because they will have also to find a way for themselves to be attractive. Now, the question is also, where will the next generation of consumers be? And what kind of contents they would prefer to consume? Is it voice? Is it video? Is it reading? Who knows, right? It's too early to say, because when we track user behavior, right, we see patterns, but we also see divergent usage of technology, right? So we expect people, and there were lots of initiatives of making things, the screen disappear, but at the end, we are still very much screen-based. So the question is, when you want to monetize, is who's going to be first to pay for it? So I don't think we have the answer for now. But the person who's going to pay is the person who derived the most value out of it. Is it us as end users and customers of the news, and we want to pay to have better news because there will be a lot of content generated that is very poor quality. So we're going to start paying better news because we want to get better quality. Or it's going to be the platform companies, the online AI companies or so on, that buying the news in bulk or maybe an access to a central database and try to exploit that. And charging, let's say, the end users on a premium basis. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to tell now because it's going to be depending on the consumer behavior at the end.
Yes. Or it's us in corporate communications. After all, we're looking for coverage. I'd be interested in the PR view on this conversation as well, where that money is going to come from. And of course, how we're going to continue to gather mind share, I suppose, which is what we're always looking for. Final comments then on, I think we've agreed AI will not kill off journalism, but it will have to evolve. Any bold predictions for where this might end up in the next 5 years?
Who wants to start?
5 years. I think that horizon's way too long for a start. So I think probably 18 months is the horizon that I'm working on from a strategic standpoint. It's moving incredibly fast, and I think, for us, from a technology standpoint, looking at industry, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of adoption. I think organizations that have had a very traditional approach to SaaS technologies or software technologies are going to adopt AI agents as part of their core. And you will not need vertically aligned software stacks anymore. I think there'll be a generic overlay of different tools that are enabled through AI, and that will mean that organizations like ours in industry will not need to purchase from the likes of, the top companies, top software houses, should we say. Instead, we'll have very customized experiences that we can build ourselves for the flow of work. And the AI experience will actually be part of the everyday for everyone in industry. And I think as a consequence of that, there'll be a very personalized experience dependent on your role in an organization. So for me as a technologist, I think it's an incredibly exciting time. I'm very enthusiastic about the future. And I think the ability for organizations to adapt will really be ultimately be limited by their creativity. I think it's an incredibly exciting time for all of us.
Right. Prof. Jan, time horizon?
I think I tend to agree with Damien on this, that it's moving so fast, and nobody would have predicted ChatGPT's success at the time, because LLMs were there for some time, but nobody had the audacity to invest so much in that technology, and it revealed to be way better than what we expected, right? So who knows what will be the next thing? If we go to agentic AI, things will be looking very different. Maybe we won't use the web as much as we do now, and so, but it can change very fast because the adoption is way faster. We see that now. I think it took 2 months for ChatGPT to get to 100 million users, if I remember correctly. So the pace of change is faster. So I think 5 years, as you were asking, it's science fiction, so it's difficult to predict. So at this point, I would go also with a more conservative view on this and say that maybe we can see agentic AI becoming the next big thing to change how people interact with digital information. After that, who knows, right?
In terms of monetizing media, I think a really good approach for media organizations would be to build your own foundation model and then sell access to that. So if you build your own foundation model with content that you trust, and only content that you trust, or content that you create that's original and is worth something, I think that will be the way that organizations can consume from media outlets.
So that's just like a news archive.
It's exactly what it is, yeah. But if you build it as a foundation model and you build a connector for consumption, I think that's a way of monetizing, media for the future. So I think there's some truth to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow. 5 years of science fiction. Any final comments, questions,
18 months.
contributions? 18 months, yeah. Late next year. That's the time horizon, late next year. Any final comments, questions, other contributions? Please join me in thanking our panelists, Professor Jan Ondras from Essex Business School and Damien Leach. Cool. And now we adjourn to the very real, non-AI generated, non-3D printed baked goods outside. Thank you all for being part of the program.